Welcome to the NanoCap podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernlin, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of NanoCap companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of NanoCap publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi, everyone. This week we have Eric Poma, the CEO of Calidi Biotherapeutics, stock ticker CLDI. Calidi Biotherapeutics is a novel oncology platform targeting solid tumors with precision viral therapy, building towards clinical validation. Sorry about that. Eric, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I usually start, Eric, with people's LinkedIn and going through their LinkedIn profile and seeing a little bit about themselves. But you are maybe the first guest to not even have a LinkedIn page. And so I just kind of wanted to start there of you were a CEO of another publicly traded company before this. It's not like you're new to business. So I would just love to, how did you avoid that this whole time with recruiting and trying to look up who you're going to hire and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, I just I don't have much of a social media presence. I decided a long time ago. I've got kids and I kind of wanted to model it for my kids that you don't have to be on social media. So yeah, I've kind of managed to get this far without it. I may have to switch over at some point, but at least so far I've managed to avoid it.
So yeah, from what I could find, you have multiple different degrees from Chapel Hill, Tar Heel for life, it looks like. And then besides that, yeah, you'd worked at an investment firm as an analyst, helping look through some biotech stuff. You're the CEO of a previous publicly traded biotech company and raised a couple $100 million over there. When did you first hear about Calidi Biotherapeutics? And what even got you excited about it in the first place? That hey, this actually is an opportunity I'd want to be involved with.
Yeah, so I am a molecular biologist by training. I got my doctorate 30 some years ago, so I've been in oncology for a long time. I got an MBA from Stern and then worked briefly as a buy-side analyst. Didn't love it, wanted to do something more operational. So the last 25 years of my career have been spent in drug development. I was at a biotech called ImClone and then a couple smaller startups. And what I've always looked for in my career is, oncology is a disease of genetic instability, and we're always looking for brand new ways to treat patients who have exhausted all other therapeutic options. That's been what I've been most excited about in oncology. There's a lot of value in incremental advances, but for me, this idea about coming up with something completely new that can really change in a dramatic fashion the landscape of oncology is really exciting. So most of the companies I've been at have been involved in that. ImClone was one of the first antibody. I worked on a new platform at my last company. And then I was introduced to Calidi about a little over a year ago. And I think the work they're doing here around oncolytic viruses and trying to make them systemic is groundbreaking. Really exciting work. The science is extraordinarily promising. It's preclinical, so we're still early. But this is what I find most exciting about oncology, the chance to do something completely new, high science, high data, and then translate that.
So were you reading random research papers and you kind of came through this kind of new breakthrough and novel idea that got you excited? Or were you at some sort of conference and you heard people kind of talking in the corner and you go, hey, I want to be involved with that?
Yeah, so it was more the latter. Again, I've been watching oncology for a long time now, and oncolytic viruses have been a really interesting approach. An oncolytic virus is just a virus that will replicate in tumor cells, and by replicating in the tumor cells, it'll destroy them. That's a very different mechanism than chemotherapy or receptor inhibition or TKIs, things like that. So it's been a really interesting space that people have been watching, and there's been some excitement recently in that space. But it's always been limited to if we inject the virus in the bloodstream, your immune system doesn't know this is therapy, it just gets rid of it. So the only advances we've seen in oncolytic virus therapy have been directly injecting it into the tumor. And most people may not know this, but most patients with metastatic disease that's kind of spread throughout their body, they're not amenable to that kind of treatment. They don't have tumors that are readily accessible for injection. It's just not a way forward for most patients. I started to hear about Calidi, though, as a company that was trying to solve this ability to just directly inject the virus into the bloodstream, avoid immune clearance. Because again, your immune system is very good at getting rid of viruses, but Calidi was coming up with ways to avoid that, and then the virus can get to whatever metastatic site a patient has and start to replicate there and express payload. And so as I came across their work, I thought, this is really interesting. I'd love to be a part of this. And it's right at the transition I like. We're doing the last bit of work to get the drug into the clinic. And then once you're in the clinic, you start to see whether the concept is working or not. That's where I really like to get involved.
And so I'm coming from like a second grade biology point of view. So what mechanism does it have that stops it from your immune system thinking, hey, this is a normal virus, I should fight it, and allows it to stay inside and fight the tumor?
Yeah, the simplest way the immune system works, and you may have heard this, is self versus non-self. Your immune system is supposed to be able to understand, hey, what's you? And we're not going to attack that. And then anything that looks foreign, we're going to attack that. That breaks down sometimes. That's why you have autoimmune diseases and stuff. But fundamentally, that's the distinction the immune system works. So what Calidi's been working on for 10 years, and it's kind of now come to fruition, is how do you make a virus look like it's self instead of non-self? And the two ways Calidi has done that is we use this highly modified form of vaccinia virus that we've been genetically engineering for a while now. We've genetically engineered it so that as it's growing, it takes on the outer membrane of a cell. We call that the envelope, so that a normal cell that you're growing it in, it takes on that envelope. And I kind of liken that to, if you're trying to rob a bank and you put on a policeman's uniform as you're leaving, you might not get caught, right? That's what that extracellular envelope does. It kind of makes the immune system look at it and say, this is too small to be a cell, but it looks like a cell, so maybe we just let it go. And then the other thing we did is we genetically engineered the virus to express this human protein called CD55. It's on a lot of human cells, and it's a signal to the immune system to just move on, right? And it's not found normally on viruses, but we've been able to engineer it to be expressed on our form of vaccinia virus, so that envelope with CD55 expressed on it in all of our animal models and all of our ex vivo human data looks like that really blocks the immune system from being able to detect the virus. And we think this is just a huge step forward in oncolytic viruses.
And you don't need to take a DNA sample from each patient to match it to them. It's just a one size fits all. Correct?
It's exactly that. There's been a huge amount of success with what we call these kind of custom biologics like CAR Ts and all that. They come with a huge price tag. They're very difficult to manufacture. Here, this is off the shelf. We think that it's good for, lots of different patients. You don't have to manufacture it, specifically to a given patient. It also means the COGS here, the cost of goods, is pretty low.
And so, walk me through the patient experience. If everything's approved, everything's perfect, in the future, someone has first off, what kind of tumor would be most likely your first use case? And then do they have to get an injection once every 3 months for a year? And so kind of talk me through that, the kind of practical side of things.
Yes. So what we're looking at here is, again, the virus does a couple things that are really unique. So one, it's for patients with metastatic disease, right? And patients who have progressed on all available therapy. Virus is very good at finding these metastatic sites and replicating within them and destroying the cancer cells that way. But it does the second thing too, where it expresses a protein called IL-15 superagonist. That's a huge flag for the immune system to come and fight cancer in that area. So it attracts NK cells, NKT cells, gamma delta T cells, these immune cells that are really good at finding cancer and destroying it. And so because of those kind of facets, what we're looking at in the first clinical study here is taking patients who have progressed on all available therapy, but who their diseases have a tendency to respond well to immunotherapy. So you think about a patient with non-small cell lung cancer. That's the most common form of cancer that we have, right? Those patients typically get chemo and an immunotherapy up front. So they're getting chemo to kind of attack the tumor cells, and they're getting Keytruda or Nivo to try and drive an immune response to the tumor. It can work really well in most patients, but ultimately those patients will progress, right? And then we want to come into that kind of a patient and say, look, we're going to find the metastatic sites with our virus. It's going to destroy tumor cells by replicating within them, but it's also going to activate another branch of the immune system to come in and try and fight the cancer as well. So the first phase 1 study that we anticipate starting next year will be in patients who have progressed on non-small cell lung cancer, triple-negative breast cancer, head and neck, melanoma, renal, these diseases of high unmet medical need, metastatic settings where patients can respond to immunotherapy, but they've already kind of exhausted that, and we want to try and resensitize them.
And so about how long is that journey going to start? Have you started looking for patients yet? And kind of if everything goes well, then not to look too far ahead, but then what's next?
Yeah, so for us, right now we're going through the FDA requirements to open what's called an IND, an investigational new drug. We should be done with that by the end of the year and start clinical studies right after that. We're looking at sites in the US and other places where we can do this. And, again, drug development is a typically long process, but what's exciting about us here is that we think we can prove things out very, very quickly. So again, if I told you I was developing a new GLP-1 inhibitor, phase 1 data is not going to tell you a lot. Phase 2 data is not going to tell you a lot. It's once you go up against Ozempic or one of the other ones that you really know what you have. So that's a long development pathway. But here, because I'm saying we're developing an oncolytic virus that can withstand clearance by the immune system and can get to metastatic sites, we can figure out if that's happening pretty quickly in phase 1. Doesn't mean we're going to get approval. You usually have to have a certain number of patients and a certain defined set to fully get a drug approved. But we will understand very quickly if the technology is working the way we designed it to work. And if that's the case, we think there's a huge run in valuations here. So if we start dosing, a handful of patients early next year, and we're seeing that virus is getting to their tumor sites and their tumors are shrinking and they're expressing lots of IL-15 superagonists and the immune system's getting activated, a handful of patients is not enough to get a drug approved. But it's enough for us to say, look, we've designed this technology and it's working. It's working in a way that nobody's really seen before. And that is what we think is really exciting here. Typically, drug development is a 5 to 10 year process. And sometimes you don't know what you have until the very end of it. Here, we think we can create a huge amount of value very quickly in the clinical study.
So since it is so straightforward, and like you said, you might be seeing results, like literally physical results almost, like immediately, like under the microscope and such, do you still have to go along like the double-blind placebo kind of study? Or is it like, hey, this is like the person's tumor is whatever, 10% smaller after 3 months. How are they going to pretend that it's a placebo?
So that's always a discussion with the FDA, but the FDA has been very amenable in patients with high unmet medical need, which these would be cancer patients with no other treatments, that you can get phase 2 approvals. So again, in the phase 1, we expect to understand very quickly whether the platform is working or not. We still have to go through the whole phase 1 to figure out what the ideal dose is and understand if there's any side effects associated. We don't expect there to be, but we have to kind of understand that. Then, to what you're saying, because these are patients with no other available options, we could go into a pivotal phase 2. We've seen that with the agency where they say you have to do the randomized control study after, but we're willing to grant conditional approval on phase 2 data that looks promising, where a good percentage of your patients, their tumors shrunk or disappeared. That's a path that we'll explore with the agency.
And so with almost all biotech companies I talk to, they kind of have one main charge, like you all have, of kind of going after lung tumors and that type of cancer. But do you have any other kind of pokers in the fire? Do you have any other kind of solutions you guys are thinking about, and any other kind of patents that this could be used for?
Yeah, so the first compound, like we talked about, going in for non-small cell lung and all that, and again, it's a virus that can withstand the immune system, get to tumor sites, start to replicate, and we've engineered it to express this protein IL-15 superagonist that supercharges the immune system. But what's nice here is that we can continue to re-engineer the virus to make new drugs where they express other payloads as well. So once we've proven out that these drugs withstand the immune clearance, get to the tumor, replicate, express payload, we have second, third, fourth molecules coming that express different payloads and can do different things. That part we think is really exciting. And again, a lot of that gets proven out early in the phase 1 that we can actually do this. And so that's part of why I think that early phase 1 data, unlike with most companies, that early phase 1 data can be really transformational.
So for a CEO of a company kind of at the stage you're at, it tends to seem that it's a lot of hurry up and wait. Well, you kind of wait for the next thing to kind of allow you to move through the next hoop and jump over the next hurdle and all that. So how do you manage your time on a day-to-day basis where like you want to be productive, you want to be doing stuff that helps grow the business just an extra 1% every day and kind of compound on itself. But at the same time, you have these major gatekeepers along the way that like you have to wait for that to be able to move over to the next thing. How do you allocate your time? Do you have an idea of, hey, once we get done with phase 1, then I'm really going to start all these projects. And then after phase 2, I'm going to start all these projects. Or like, how do you even just like allocate your time?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And there's different constituencies. a lot of my focus internally is there's blocking and tackling that needs to get done. We have to get GMP manufacturing up and running, which we're doing a really nice job on. We have to run all of the animal models that the FDA requires to open up a study. And those are, we think we know what the outcome is there. We're pretty comfortable with that, but it's still just a lot of work that has to get done. So some of it is just the operational focus. But then there's an external focus that are around a couple of key constituencies. One, we're having constant discussions with the FDA to make sure that we're thinking about things the same way they are and kind of laying the groundwork for success here. So that's a part of it. Two, we have lots of discussions now with thought leaders in oncology, clinical trial investigators, right? So if we run our study at University of whatever or Memorial Sloan Kettering or MD Anderson, we're starting to have discussions with the principal investigators at those sites saying, hey, what kind of patients are you seeing? Would this be apropos to some of the people you're seeing in your clinic? And we're starting to think through that. How would you want to see us administer the drug? How frequently? All that kind of stuff. So we're having those discussions. And then a big part of my time is having discussions with the investor community, kind of letting them understand our story. This is, Calidi's been around for a while, but the technology we're talking about now really came out in the last year and a half, and we only really started publicly talking about it in the last kind of 6 to 9 months. So a lot of this is just going out, proselytizing, explaining to people what the company is doing, why we think we're at such an important transition here, and what data we expect to come. So it's just, you got to keep an eye on the blocking and tackling because you can't get anywhere without doing that. And it's extraordinarily complex and it's behind the scenes, so you don't get any credit for it, but you can't fail at it. And then a lot of it is just engaging with outside stakeholders about how to make sure this is successful once it goes into the clinic. And then a big piece is talking to investors and saying, look, I don't know if you know what we're actually doing here.
And so do you have a distribution method in mind for your product? Are you looking to manufacture this and sell it yourself? Are you looking to license this with a larger company? Are you looking to do all of the above, or just go where the kind of winds take you?
Yeah, I think right now we're wholly focused on getting into the clinic and proving out the technology. It would be nice to partner, and we're starting to get interest from pharma around, hey, this is really exciting technology, and we, starting to look at this and try and understand if there's a way for us to partner together. So I'm not going to take that off the table, but right now our destiny is in our own hands in terms of getting into the phase 1, showing that the technology does what we designed it to do. That's going to be a huge change in the company, and that's what we're just wholly focused on.
So if everything goes perfect, as we wrap up here, everything goes perfect over the next 5 years, where is Calidi in the next 5 years, and what's the move then?
Yeah, you're going to see us with multiple compounds in the clinic across different stages of development. You're going to see people saying, wow, they really cracked the nut of how do you give systemic delivery with an oncolytic virus. They've opened up the door for a whole new paradigm in treatment of oncology. I would imagine that we're partnered with some groups and that we're just driving multiple drugs through the clinic at that point.
Awesome. Well, Eric, thank you so much for everything you do to kind of help out people and help out those who are in need and sick. If people want to learn a little bit more about Calidi Biotherapeutics, where should I send my audience?
Yeah, go to our website, calidibio.com. We've kind of laid out the technology and what our plans are for it.
And the stock ticker again is CLDI. For all of you still listening, please remember to subscribe and review. Thanks.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement therefore by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast